Question: how do you remake a cult classic for the 21st century? Answer: not like this. Here's everything that went wrong with 2024's The Crow. In mid-March 2024, Lionsgate dropped the first trailer for The Crow. Instantly, the marketing campaign for this remake got off on the wrong foot. The moody trailer confirmed this remake would cover the same storytelling terrain of the original movie and emphasized lots of R-rated violence. Immediately, the press expressed disdain for the project, while the first trailer for The Crow remake secured over 91,000 dislikes a few days after its launch. It was a staggering turn of events that instantly cast a grim aura over the entire production. In the months that followed, Lionsgate struggled to stir anticipation for The Crow. Part of the problem came from the small scale of the studio's promotional campaign. The studio reportedly spent only $15 million on marketing the feature, just slightly over 10% of the promotional budget for Deadpool and Wolverine.
Let's give the people what they came for!
The meager marketing spend meant that even seemingly no-brainer promotional tie-ins for The Crow went unexploited. Most notably, the 2024 edition of the San Diego International Comic-Con featured no Crow panels or photo opportunities. All in all, nothing about Lionsgate's The Crow marketing screamed confidence, meaning audiences found it much easier to give the movie the cold shoulder. When the idea for a Crow remake first emerged, Mark Wahlberg's name was attached as a contender for the lead part. Wahlberg didn't last long in the role, but several other actors would later be eyeballed as a replacement. In fact, the titular role of the Crow became something of a revolving door, through which various leading men walked in and out during the 2010s. Bradley Cooper, Tom Hiddleston, and Jason Momoa, among many others, were connected to the part at some point in time. The 1994 version of The Crow had been meant to launch Brandon Lee as a movie star. In sharp contrast, the initial plan for the remake was to merge the property with a red-hot leading man. In the end, the role went to Bill Skarsgård, who was previously best known for playing Pennywise the Clown in It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2.
Time to float!
While those movies were smash hits, Skarsgård himself would freely admit he's not a box office draw. Supporting Skarsgård was famous musician FKA Twigs and character actor Danny Houston. Few recognizable faces featured in the rest of the cast. Certainly, nobody in The Crow was famous enough to help overcome the movie's shoddy marketing campaign. The very first rumblings of a straightforward Crow remake began in 2008, just 3 years after the last direct-to-video sequel to the original film, The Crow: Wicked Prayer, hit the marketplace. At this point in time, The Crow was still relatively fresh in people's minds. It was also an era in which the superhero movie marketplace was still far from peak capacity. That's a radically different pop culture landscape to the one that The Crow finally entered in August 2024, however. By the time the remake opened, it had been over 3 decades since the original Crow premiered, and nearly 2 decades since the last Crow movie. The Iron hadn't just cooled on the Crow brand name, it had gone Arctic cold. That fact appeared to evade Lionsgate's marketing team, however. The abysmal campaign for The Crow leaned too heavily on the pre-existing brand name, with many of the posters and TV spots merely establishing that a new Crow movie was on the horizon. Some franchises can get away with simply leaning on a familiar logo, and perhaps that promotional approach would have been enough back in 2011 or 2012. But a 2024 Crow remake needed to do more to get people's attention, given how much the franchise had fallen out of fashion. There was once a time when R-rated movies stood out in the PG-13 dominated blockbuster marketplace. Just look at summer 2013, when The Conjuring distinguished itself in a sea of PG-13 hits. Summer 2024, however, has been packed to the gills with R-rated tentpoles. Bad Boys, Ride or Die, Alien Romulus, and especially Deadpool and Wolverine have been among the biggest box office hits of the season. This meant that The Crow couldn't promote itself as a one big bloody action movie in a season of sanitized family-friend fare. Instead, to the unconverted, The Crow felt like more of the same. More pressingly, the movie's August 23rd release date placed it in direct competition with summer 2024's biggest R-rated movies. Alien Romulus, for example, opened just 1 week earlier, partially satisfying the public's appetite for graphically violent chaos.
I can't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies.
The real fatal blow, though, was Deadpool and Wolverine, which topped the domestic box office, despite being in its 5th week of release. Honestly, The Crow was always going to struggle to bring in audiences. This became all the more challenging, however, when it debuted into a marketplace in which a more light-hearted and better-reviewed movie also promised a ton of R-rated superhero carnage. The original Crow has become an object of deep personal affection for many 90s kids, and this cult following spans demographics beyond just film and comic book geeks.
I wish the rain would stop just once.
Can't rain all the time.
For instance, the original movie is revered for its influence on the metal and punk music scenes. Meanwhile, folks growing up in the goth sub-community were fond of the film for providing a rare gothic hero in an era of cinema that mostly used their subculture as a punchline. Then, of course, there's a reverence for the film's late star, Brandon Lee, who was accidentally shot and killed during filming. That tragedy has led many modern retrospectives of The Crow to highlight Lee's remarkable work in the title role. Remakes are a dime a dozen in Hollywood, but something felt extra macabre about this one, given the material's permanent intertwining with Lee's personal life. It didn't help that the marketing for the 2024 Crow made the film look sanitized and mainstream, a sharp contrast to the way the original feature resonated deeply with grimy subcultures. This new Crow was supposed to ride brand name familiarity to box office glory. Instead, people's love for the original movie just made it harder to sell a new version of the story. In the days leading up to The Crow's release, a particularly bizarre element of its marketing campaign emerged. Lionsgate didn't allow official reviews to drop for the movie until 4 p.m. Pacific Time on August 22nd. That meant many Thursday preview screenings for The Crow were well underway by the time critics could publish their reviews of the film. It was a strange measure that not only signaled minimal studio confidence in the project, but also meant that there was no opportunity for The Crow to drum up buzz before opening day. To Lionsgate executives, the prospect of The Crow becoming a critical punching bag before release may have sounded like a nightmare. However, it's worth remembering that there's no such thing as bad publicity. Even a deluge of bad reviews 2 days before release could have inspired some social media chatter about The Crow. Perhaps it would have even motivated a few moviegoers to plunk down money for tickets in the name of hate watching. Instead, the conversation surrounding the movie was totally dead leading up to those first public screenings. The only Crow-related discourse that actually came about related to a weird promotional double standard in which influencers were allegedly allowed to talk about the feature before critics. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, several intriguing theatrical movie-going trends have emerged. One especially important trend is that Gen Z moviegoers have become the most important audience for studios to pursue. These avid movie theater attendees have fueled some of the biggest post-2021 box office hits domestically. Basically, if you want a lucrative feature film in 2024, you better appeal to folks under the age of 30. That demo's prominence in modern moviegoing was reflected in the fact that 58% of the opening weekend audience of The Crow landed in the 18 to 34 age range. However, the film's lack of appeal to a broader range of younger audiences clearly limited its box office potential. Bill Skarsgård isn't a beloved heartthrob on TikTok, and FKA Twigs is nowhere near famous enough with college-aged audiences to carry a whole movie. Plus, the Crow brand name is practically unknown to younger moviegoers, and nothing in the marketing campaign made the film appear relevant to young people, like, say, the trailers for Challengers did. Even the use of gothic aesthetics in the posters and trailers felt out of step with the modern punk and emo scenes. In courting the nostalgia of moviegoers, The Crow failed to utilize a demographic that's proven critical for any box office phenomenon since 2021. The biggest domestic movie of the 2020s so far was Spider-Man: No Way Home, which scored a mighty $800 million plus haul in the United States.
Hello, Peter.
But while No Way Home flourished financially, superhero movies in general have had a rocky track record this decade compared to the last. A slew of high-profile, costly bombs have plagued the once untouchable Marvel and DC brands. This included costly 2023 duds, The Marvels and The Flash, both of which failed to match even the domestic opening weekends of prior Marvel and DC titles with their total box office grosses. This was the unpredictable box office landscape into which The Crow soared. When the concept of remaking The Crow was first bandied about, making a superhero movie mostly meant printing your own money, unless you were very unlucky. This reboot, however, entered a marketplace where even new Marvel Studios titles can struggle to match box office expectations. Even with Deadpool and Wolverine killing it financially, the erratic track record of 2020's superhero movies remains, which can't have made things much easier for The Crow. Sometimes word of mouth can save a movie after a poor opening weekend. If audiences really like what they see, positive buzz can spread like wildfire and ensure that a release gains ground after an underwhelming bow. It's a very rare phenomenon, but the likes of Elemental and The Greatest Showman have shown that it can happen. After a dismal opening day box office performance, the producers of The Crow were likely praying that this might happen to them too. Unfortunately, the opening night cinema score for The Crow sealed the movie's fate. Audiences gave the movie a disappointing B- grade. If there's any sliver of an upside for The Crow, it'd be that it didn't receive the worst cinema score for a 2024 superhero movie. That honor belongs to the C+ score slapped on Madame Web back in February. However, a B- cinema score puts The Crow in disastrous company in terms of superhero movie word of mouth, with the infamous bomb Dark Phoenix receiving the same grade in June 2019. April 2022's Morbius, meanwhile, got a similar C+ grade from audiences.
I'm starting to get hungry. You don't want to see me when I'm hungry.
All these earlier titles suffered catastrophic second weekend plummets, with those cinema scores indicating immense audience displeasure that warned off other moviegoers. With such a disastrous response, the word of mouth for The Crow prevented the movie from making a last-minute escape from box office hell. The Crow confirmed a brutal Hollywood truth. If you want to launch a lucrative superhero movie, don't distribute it through Lionsgate. The studio has proven incredibly successful at launching the John Wick, Hunger Games, and Saw franchises, but its box office track record with superhero films is truly awful. The studio has distributed a litany of infamous superhero feature flops, ranging from The Spirit to the 2019 Hellboy boondoggle to 2017's costly Power Rangers bomb. Only April 2010's low-budget hit Kick-Ass proved to be an exception to this rule. Otherwise, Lionsgate's superhero fare seems doomed to fail. Lionsgate's main problem of launching superhero movies is that the studio typically acquires and releases titles based on superheroes who have already had big-screen adventures. Hellboy, Power Rangers, The Crow, these are all characters that had previously famous cinematic incarnations. It's no surprise that Lionsgate's closest thing to a hit superhero movie was Kick-Ass, which adapted a character who had never before been seen on the big screen. Otherwise, trying to wring hits out of familiar brands has never been a recipe for success by Lionsgate, dating back to the days of Punisher Warzone. The Crow would probably have never made bank even with Disney-level distribution, but Lionsgate's cursed handling of the superhero genre certainly did it no favors.